Egan, could you please take the roll?
Mr. Coughlin?
Here.
Mr. Frye?
Here.
Ms. Fitzgibbon?
Here.
Mr. Jackson?
Here.
Ms. Sword?
Here.
Ms. Genter? Here. President Dirks?
Here. I know that Mr. Sullivan's traveling, as is Ms. Tarpinian.
And Mr.
Didn't
Bouban
hear
had-
from Mr. Bouban.
Mr. Bouban emailed and said he had a work.
Oh, okay. Good.
Emergency, so.
Okay. At this point in the meeting, the board would entertain any public comment. If you do want to address the board, please come up to the podium, give us your name, and try to restrict your comments to 3 minutes if you can. 3 people are already signed up, so I'll just call you. Julie Dixon.
Public speaking, my favorite thing.
It's a small group. It's all right.
I'm Julie Dixon, and I've gotten to know some of you pretty well over the years. We've been working on this for a number of years now. My husband Steve and I are the ones that submitted an offer some years ago. We're directly adjacent to the property. I want to take a moment to just, I've never said it before, I want to thank everyone who's a member of the board who's decided to make this part of their life, and the new members too. We haven't met you yet. I have never spoken to you, just briefly at the last meeting. I know it's a thankless job. I've done a couple thankless jobs myself, so I know how that matters. First off, the main thing that I wanted to say today is something that I don't think I've ever said before, and that's that I want to clear up any misconception that there may be that the reason Steve and I want this land is to dig it up and farm it. That's the farthest thing from our mind. In fact, our main intent is to keep it exactly the way it is, without changing it at all, maintaining it. And in fact, in a letter that I sent to the board in January of 2015, I actually argued for preservation of the land. In case anybody hasn't seen it or doesn't remember it, here it is, and I've highlighted the section where I talk about that. I think that's probably all I wanted to say today. That's a misconception that might be out there that I wanted to clear up. I have a history. My mom's sister was a very active ecologist in New York's Erie Coast, Lake Erie Coast. She was very active in getting the legislature to work on cleaning up the coast of Lake Erie, which had turned into a sewer. And she was very proficient at educating me in the importance of wetlands. So my history in ecological sciences goes a ways back. I'm not a scientist, but I appreciate my aunt having helped me understand. So if anybody wants to see my letter from 3 years ago, this is it. And that's really all I wanted to say today. I want to make sure that that was out there because I've never actually said that. I just kind of thought that was understood.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And then Don for Seth.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Don Perseth, 608 Kingsland, Stoughton, Wisconsin. The reason I'm here is actually for the same purpose, for the 48 acres the school district currently owns. Currently the treasurer of the Quail Forever chapter in the state of Wisconsin. We're the first and only chapter in the state of Wisconsin. The reason that the chapter was started, we started in November of 2016. John Severson, who is the president of the chapter, and myself, we've been raising bobwhite quail for the last 5 or 6 years now. We've been raising them on this farm. We get them when they're 4 weeks old. We've been releasing them. We've had some success, but we're finding that we needed more resources. So that's why we started the Quail Forever chapter. We have access to quite a few. We've been doing fundraisers. We are looking for donations, and we are heavily relying on volunteers. Any money that we raise stays here in our chapter. None of the money goes to the Pheasant Forever, who is our sister, our parent organization. The big thing for Quail Forever is habitat improvement and restoration. Preserving wetlands is one of the main things that they're discussing right now at the national level for Pheasants Forever and Quail Forever. I saw the property yesterday. I was out at Mr. Coyle's property and had some discussions with him. We did as a group, and it's a beautiful piece of land. Our intention is to never change it. What we would actually consider doing is doing controlled burns there, getting rid of invasive species, because there are quite a few. I've seen the plot maps, box elders, and some of those invasive species. There's honeysuckle, and there's also multi-flower rose bushes. Those have got to go. Those have to get taken out of there. So we have access to all of these opportunities to take care of that. The other thing that we would do is create better cover. We wouldn't take care of, getting rid of all the wetland. We want the wetlands. He said that the tiles were broke. That's perfect. We don't want any of the tiles in there. And we would plant pollinators. We would probably do borders with the pollinators because it'd be hard to get in there with equipment. And we really don't have any desire to use big equipment in there. A lot of it would be hands-on chainsaws, small lawn mowers, that type of stuff. And really, food plots are not something we would see there or use there. There's plenty of cover and food around it. But we do food plots for individuals who would like them on their property. And really, it's just a benefit to all wildlife, because that's really what we're looking at, is preserving the land, putting up bluebird houses, and just trying to create a more natural setting out there, because it's a beautiful, beautiful location. One of the main things about Quail Forever is stewardship, leaving a legacy. That's really, as far as John and I are concerned, and those that we're associated with, that's what we want. We want to leave the land, if we can, better than it was when we took it over. In that vein, kind of reluctant to say this, but I do know Frank Sutherland. He is a personal friend of mine, and John's as well. And we actually have a personal investment with Frank outside of his professional. So knowing this, I think with his involvement, everyone would understand that it'd be treated fairly for everybody. Nobody would get shortchanged or feel like they weren't getting a good rapport out of this. So I guess in conclusion, having seen the property, we're really excited about possibly working something out. We're open to suggestions. If you have questions, you can certainly contact me or John. I can leave cards if you need them. We are more than happy. We could have Alex Weber, who is our Pheasants Forever Regional Representative, come and talk, because he would have more of the nuts and bolts as far as what they would be looking for. But basically, Pheasants Forever would never own the land. It would be put in a trust, and it would forever be left as it is. It would just be maintaining it and taking care of it, and hopefully, again, leaving that legacy of leaving it better than it was when we got it. So thank you very much for your time, and like I said, if you have further questions, just let me know and I can get you some information.
Thank you.
All right.
Yeah, if you could leave us some of your cards, that'd be
Sure,
great.
I can do that. I will grab some in a head.
Okay,
All
thanks. And then John Doherty.
Hi, everybody.
Hi.
Good evening.
I sent this to you about an hour ago, but I wanted to read it in public comment as well. In recent weeks, I'm sure, by the way, sorry, Jonathan Doherty, Stoughton High School teacher, and tonight representing the Stoughton Education Association. In recent weeks, I'm sure you've all been preoccupied with school safety and various precautionary measures being discussed by our state and national elected leaders. I know that my colleagues and I have been. In an online poll, the members of the Stoughton Education Association recently voted overwhelmingly to ask the district to work together with the SEA to write a joint resolution against arming teachers with deadly weapons. I believe this is an area where we can all agree. We ask that representatives from the board, administration, and the SEA sit down and work collaboratively on defining our shared stance as a district. Furthermore, we know and appreciate that the district is looking into the possibility of installing technology for all staff to access the PA system from any landline phone in the district in their respective building. And we understand the district is moving forward with considerations for more cameras inside of our schools. I would also ask the board to create a task force, which would include the SEA, to look at and discuss other areas of concern, such as classroom door locks, rooms with multiple entrances, rooms with multiple interior windows, and safety drills like nearby districts conduct for students and staff alike. This evening, I sent all of you this information, along with how Madison Teachers Incorporated and the Madison Metropolitan School District are working together on these very issues. Thank you for all the work you're doing in general and specifically with this, and I look forward to working together.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else that wanted to address the board? Okay, thank you. Normally, we would have a legislative update, but with our legislative liaison enjoying the warmer weather of Florida, I don't think we're going to have that tonight. So, next up is Dr. Onsager's report.
Thanks, Scott. And I just have a couple of quick things in light of the weather. We're trying to keep this moving. It was a heck of a weekend for our high school sports teams. Our girls basketball played Thursday in the sectional semis. Unfortunately, they came up short, but great accomplishment on their season. Our boys basketball team played Saturday night against DeForest, beat DeForest, so now they are advancing to the sectionals, which is this week. Thursday at Sun Prairie, where we'll play Monona Grove. And our wrestling team took first in state at the team tournament. We have been runners-up for the last 3 years, wrestling Kaukauna in the finals. We actually met Kaukauna in the match before the finals and beat Kaukauna, and then went on and won state. So it's a heck of an accomplishment for the boys. And so they were escorted into town Saturday night by the fire trucks, had a rally Sunday because they did not want to take away from the boys basketball team on Saturday, so they had a rally at the high school on Sunday afternoon. And then we also got word that our Quiz Bowl team has qualified for nationals again, which is a great accomplishment. So it was a great weekend for our high school. And just, you know, reiterates all the great things that our kids are doing both academically and athletically. So that was on the front this weekend. Just foreshadowing a couple things real quick. I'm working on in April, and I'll work with Scott, that maybe tentatively the first board meeting in April. We did this a couple years ago, but I think it's time to do it again. Going into the Fab Lab and actually creating something, running the board through what it is we're doing in the Fab Lab. So I'm trying to coordinate that for the first meeting in April. Also, which is kind of talking to Jonathan's comments, we do have a safety committee, and they are going to give an update the first meeting in April about what they're doing, addressing some of the things. And I know Donna and Scott and I have been talking about some sort of resolution on guns, etc. That I believe Donna was going to bring something at the next board meeting, a discussion of how the board wants to proceed. So just a few foreshadowing and a congratulations to our high school students for a great weekend.
All right, thank you. Any questions about any of that? Thank you. Next up is the consent agenda.
I move approval of February 26, 2018 regular board meeting minutes. Move approval of the February 22nd through March 20th, 2018 check register as presented. Some resignations: Melissa Mickle, 5th grade teacher at Sand Hill Elementary School, effective at the end of the 2017-18 school year. Megan York, 7th grade science teacher at River Bluff Middle School, effective March 30th, 18, pending liquidated damages of $1,000. Retirements: Dawn Anderson, second grade teacher at Kegansa Elementary, effective at the end of the 17-18 school year. Nancy Beshak, media specialist at Kegansa Elementary, effective at the end of the 2017-18 school year. Mary Grace Ott, school psychologist at Stoughton High School, effective at the end of the 17-18 school year. Jean Rood, third grade teacher at Fourth Prairie Elementary, effective at the end of the 2017-18 school year. Chris Schultz, math teacher at Stoughton High School, effective at the end of the 17-18 school year. The recommended motion, the motion is to approve the retirement of Dawn Anderson, Nancy Beshak, Mary Grace Ott, Jen Rood, and Chris Schultz at the end of the 17-18 school year, and the resignation of Megan York, effective March 30th, 2018, pending liquidated damages of $1,000, and Melissa Mickle, effective at the end of the 17-18 school year. I move approval of the 66.0301 agreement for cooperative girl hockey as presented. I'm sorry about
It's okay. The consent agenda has been moved for approval. Is there a second?
Second.
Second from Joe. Any discussion or questions? All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? All right, and the consent agenda is approved. Under discussion items, first up is an update on the 48 acres.
Good evening. I was here just some weeks ago when we were talking about this, and you gave me a list of things to do, and so we've gone off and done them. I included in the packet in the executive summary, kind of the summary of that meeting. We had a lot of voices at the table. They were very generous with their time. Men from the Fish and Wildlife organization here in Wisconsin, federal organization here in Wisconsin, the executive director of the Audubon Society, director of the park, Dane County Parks. And so we came together and tried to talk about the history of this property, how it was gifted to us, what we believed it could be at the beginning and after our research and our work, and lots of people investing lots of time in their hopes and where it could go. Kind of coming to terms with the fact that we might not be the right entity to own this property. And as we talked with this small group of people, they agreed with me, with us. We all kind of came to the fact that maybe a school district isn't the right entity to own this property. It's a landlocked property. To use it for classrooms of children, classroom settings, would require the development of a road, or the drive, would require some kind of facility there, and then would require some development of the land because it's very wet and getting wetter. As the drain tiles continue to fall apart, it becomes a wetter wetland, which is a good thing, but makes it difficult for what we thought we might use it for 4 years, 5 years ago. So we have, and that's where Don's name came to me also. I communicated with Groundswell Conservancy, someone here maybe gave me that name, and I haven't had a response from them. And so we're sort of at a place now where it comes kind of back to the school board. We're really the owners, I think, of this gift for us, to help give us some direction about what do you think we should be doing with it. If you would agree that we're not the right entity, I mean, it's not part of our mission to nurture the lands, develop, sustain, conserve, then we have to decide what next, what else. Do we need to study how we move the property forward? Do we need to talk about how to dispose of a property that's in our possession. If we're interested in that, how do we make decisions about where the property goes next? To whom, to what entity, to what organization maybe? If you believe that it is in the right place, that we are the entity that should nurture, develop, maintain this property, then we also have to have a kind of hard conversation about what the purpose for this property will be, what audience might use it, whether we want to pursue the development of it, who might be the point person. I'm hoping we can kind of make some decisions about that. And then there are some annual resources. We've really invested only in, the educator's time and the official survey of the property. However, and so we haven't done a controlled burn. We've pursued how that would work. We haven't done any mowing or eradication of species, of invasive species. And so if we want to maintain that as part of our district, then we also need to think about where the resources would come to treat it as it probably should be treated, the land. So, I did give you all of that in summary, I hope, and then I'm here really to answer any questions or direction you might have for where you'd like us to go next.
And ideally, we're hoping that we could have discussion or get direction by the end of June, because Judy is retiring, and when Judy has invested a lot of time and energy and is kind of our expert kind of right now on this. And so ideally, before Judy retires, if we know a direction we want to go, would help then administration and staff start making some decisions.
So, questions from folks? Steve?
Thanks, Judy, and I appreciate your concern for the appropriateness. Was this land at all part of the facilities study?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay, I mean, it's not a facility, but
It's not a
it's
facility,
land,
yeah.
and I didn't know if it,
Yeah.
okay.
We do have records of the review of the land from both the DNR, from two different people on the DNR. So they've kind of done the analysis of the property, if that's helpful in making decisions.
I didn't know if it was part of a study, and then we'd wait till the study comes back to give us some helpful news.
Couple things. I was glad to hear you say, Tim, that we were talking about June, because I was afraid we were gonna digest this week and decide
No,
in
no.
2 weeks. This is a little big for that.
Right.
So that's good. I'm also wondering, I saw Mr. Quayle here, but does anybody know, does he have thoughts? I mean, not that we need to or not take that direction, but I'm wondering if he has
He's
any.
really all about conservancy, and his initial goal was conservancy and education. And he spoke, we can probably bring those notes back up again from a couple of weeks ago. He spoke here. He's very passionate about it. He has helped make the connections to some of these other people, the Audubon Society and for sure Dane County Parks. He is, I would say, passionate about its return to native Wisconsin land, and has been really helpful in making connections. He's agreed to help us finance a transition of the property. He understands that when he gave us the land, it was clear that it wasn't for him to decide how it would be used. So, if we end up building on it, both the wetland, that wasn't for him to say yes or no. But I think he's, I know I can speak for his conservancy perspective,
No, it does, yeah. That answers it exactly, so thank you.
Did you say it another question?
No,
Okay,
I may come up with one, but not right now.
okay, you'll,
I think before we have also talked about the possibility of going and look at the land. We haven't been able to do that. Is there any possibility that we can plan for a day to, I
Well-
mean, not right now.
no, but I mean,
But before
it's
June.
publicly accessible. You can just drive out there and take a look at it.
Oh, okay.
Sure. It's
But,
pretty
I'm
wet.
willing to host it.
Some of us have seen it.
Yeah, yeah, Joe and I walked it when we first got it.
okay, okay. But also, I see that and the summary that you sent, there have been things like with the UW Arboretum, anybody from them come? We thought about having some sort of cooperation, like they both can use it, I mean.
The people that we've talked to, and they've been really extremely generous with their time, talk about large land masses, which while 48 acres seems like a lot of land to me, it is not in their development. They're looking for land that is contiguous to other parts of land that is already part of the parks or part of the Audubon Society, so that it can kind of grow a space they're already nurturing. This would really be an island of land for them, and they're not seeing an application for them.
Okay.
You know, if there was a long, large corridor of land and the 48 acres was part of it, that would be another story. And so most people are seeing it as it's a landlocked piece of property, and it has, you know, residential houses along one side of it and at least two other owners next to other edges of the land. So they were, again, really generous with ideas and generous with.
But they don't want to
But they
form
don't
part
want
of it. Okay.
The man, I think his name was Mike from Fish and Wildlife, has worked with groups in finding seed or collecting seed at the Arboretum, where we might be able to nurture a more native plant species there than some of what has grown back since farming.
I know that the Arboretum has tons of wetlands that they do different things. You have to walk a great distance from the place where you park the buses to go to those places, and they have built like decks where people walk over, you know, that. So I don't think we have that possibility of parking the buses far and.
No, there, you might be able to get 3 cars in that space.
It's pretty tight.
It's pretty limited.
Okay.
For us to build anything on that land requires an $800 permit. That's just an $800 application, which if they say no, you don't get your $800 back. So it's pretty pricey to even, you know, for school district to be handing out $800 to be considered for impacting the land. So like for a boardwalk or to lay mulch or something so that you could create paths that would require this permit before we could, you know, even ask volunteers to come in and help do some work there. And then we have who is our audience that would use it. You know, we initially thought groups of children would go and, you know, look at plants through the seasons and look at evidence of the animals there and look at the water scrapes, but that would require a pretty expensive, I don't think that's in your notes someplace, pretty expensive paving of the county road, Dixon Drive, and then also somehow having a turnaround in that space.
And
while-
bathrooms.
And while individual high school kids could go out and do some work with conservation organizations, and plan ahead. The group of kindergartners or fourth graders, as soon as they get out, they'll need to use the bathroom. So we would have to plan for that as well. So those add up really quickly in annual, both development expenses and annual expenses.
Other questions? Go ahead.
Just really more a comment. I know when we first started talking about this, I was pretty eager to go out and see it for myself. And I went out with Nicole, you see her. And we went in the winter when it was all frozen. And so it seemed, I mean, it was great to walk on. It was lovely in the winter time. And I thought about that a little bit. And then I went out in summer with my children because I thought they might want to, and we didn't get very far before we were pretty much knee deep in mud. So you really would need paths. The only spot that was kind of solid was right from the drive down, and that was
That little hill.
yeah, and that was really about it. Everything else was, and it's lovely. I mean, you could see all kinds of animals and stuff out there, but
One of the
it would require a ton of improvement to make it usable by
Classrooms
kids.
of children.
Go
and I
ahead.
was with two.
I will say that Scott found a skull out there on one of our first trips. We left it there, so it's still there.
No, I'm sure it's gone now.
Yes,
The
several
mice
years
eat
ago.
those.
Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead, John.
So I guess going along with these comments, is it accurate to say that the school district has not been able to come up with any way to fit this land into curriculum at any grade level without some sort of significant development on top of the land? Okay.
I will say that as a result of the gift, it made us start talking about reinvigorating outdoors into our curriculum. And that we talked a lot about that. Last summer, we offered a day-long workshop with Project Wild from DNR. And we had, 40 classroom teachers that were involved in that and embraced it. You see the outdoor education and taking hold in our kindergarten classrooms, and we've been working on these outdoor learning environments with some architects that are helping us figure out how we want to use our outdoor space. I have to give all of that insight and idea of re-nurturing that outdoor educationness back to this, because that's where we got going again, and enthusiasm. But indeed, the property itself is probably not feasible for our use.
Yeah, and I mean, I hope that as we talk about, or as, by June, we talk about the school district potentially not being proper stewards for this land in the long term, we can keep that in mind and take some comfort in the fact that the school district has derived some sort of programming use out of the at least temporary up till now ownership of this piece of land. Thanks.
Thank you.
Did you have something, John?
Well, I'm just sitting here listening to a lot of this, and when we talk about improvements, they're not. This is a wetland, and
Yeah.
and I don't want to make any decision now, and I'm not, but, when we say things like paving or paths or piers on a wetland, wetlands are pretty special and pretty important, and Wisconsin's apparently lost over half of them in the last 200 years, I heard on the radio this morning, so I guess it's just something I'm mulling around, that I think if we were to hold on to it and try and do something with it, I'd have a hard time coming to the conclusion that we improved it, so, for what it's worth.
Yeah, I too, when I first heard about this gift, I was super enthusiastic because, my dream if I ever won the lottery is to buy marginal farmland, take it out of production, restore it back to what it was pre-settlement days. And I thought that's maybe something we could do here. But when we walked out there, two things struck me right away. Is it confirmed that this is truly a wetland. I mean, the DNR told us that it was over 90%. Not designated, but recognized by DNR as wetland. Well, that immediately restricts a lot of what we could do with the land if we wanted to. But secondly, it's covered with invasive species. I mean, there's garlic, mustard, box elder, rose bushes all over the place. And for the district to undertake to restore that, even with a lot of volunteer help, that would be a multi-year project with a lot of thousands of hours involved. And as Joe said, for it to be accessible, you really would have to build the boardwalks like they have at the UW Arboretum, which is very expensive, and you gotta maintain them. I mean, you'd be taking care of those every single year. We would, I mean, I think we'd like to come to a final decision before you're gone, but I think we don't need to wait until June to do that. My 2 cents is, I think, I've sadly come to the same point that you have, that we probably aren't really the entity to own this property, because we've had it for, what, 3 years now? And, yeah, 4 years. And, you know, we've done nothing to maintain it, conserve it, preserve it, restore it. And there are groups out there that can pull the people together and the resources together to do that. So it seems to me like our decision probably comes down to, first of all, do we want to keep it? But then secondly, if not, where is it going to go? And if you, do you know, Judy, of entities that might be willing to, you know, take the land over from us? Was that part of the discussions at all?
We'd have to do more learning. I know that Quail Forever, they don't own the land. There's something called a land trust.
Yep.
Don't know what that is. They use all kinds of land deed kind of terms. I don't know.
Yeah, there are a lot of conservation organizations. Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation does something similar, where we could continue to own the land or place it in a trust, one or the other, and then another group would be responsible for taking care of it, for want of a better term.
So there's a possibility that those are, I feel like we're kind of at the place to generate those possibilities now,
Okay.
rather than how are we going to develop the land. I love what you said, Joe, that would not be a development for it at all. It would be undermining the value that land brings to Wisconsin Stoughton children. So we're kind of at that place where we need to, I guess the next part is to learn about these alternatives.
So, Steve, go ahead.
Yeah, and I agree with Scott that I think it's opportunity now to really look at the options that we have in front of us or available to us, and then make a decision on that. I would like to, I mean, and no offense to Mr. Furseth, but when I hear Quails Forever, I think of hunting. And so I would like, okay.
I can speak to that
Good.
a little bit.
Okay, so.
If I can say so, I actually had a meeting with Mr. Quayle yesterday, and we had a lengthy discussion with him yesterday.
So there might be some.
So he was very excited.
I appreciate that.
Yes.
So we, setting some criteria, I would like to think that it still has educational value with whatever option we might choose to take. So if it's a partnership, we own it, it's a partnership, there's still educational value there.
Sure, and I certainly having our students participate in removing invasive species, things like that, there's huge educational value in that. What I'm thinking, and again, this is just me, is that to partner with some entity that does this on a larger scale, so that we don't have to figure out how to do it on our own, probably would make more sense. But I guess I'd like to get a sense of how everybody's feeling. Do we want Judy to explore other ownership, stewardship options beyond us just having sole responsibility for the property ourselves? Is that?
Yes.
Okay.
And I would suggest that we incorporate legal
Mm-hmm.
into that, because I don't know what restrictions being a school district and a public entity might or might not have on some of the options.
The
Sure.
liabilities, right?
And so I would suggest that as we explore options, we pull in our district council, just to make sure we know exactly what we can and cannot do, as far as if, talk about placing it in a trust, or
Right.
what we have to do to do some of that.
Just a second. So is 60 days, is that a realistic time frame for you to come back to the board?
Yes.
Because like I said, I don't want us to do this right before you're due to leave.
No, I think that's fair.
Okay. Joe, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, it's fine. I would just ask Judy if you can to find out maybe accessibility questions. I mean, would we still be able to go out there? I mean, would a few students be able to go out there? I don't
Actually,
know how
the
that
group
works.
that was here, both Audubon Society and the Dade County Parks, and Quail Forever, have all said that they would welcome youth, would welcome the next generation of conservationists, and that those people are probably more of our high school kids, or more of the kids that are gonna help do the work, to learn from people who know how to conserve and nurture the land. So it probably wouldn't be a classroom of fourth graders, but certainly all of them talk about bringing those next generations of people out into the land and understand its value. So I didn't hear any limitations from that. I only heard their limitations in owning the property.
Mhm.
That sounds really interesting.
Sounds like a good Eagle Scout project.
Yeah, well, I was kind of thinking that.
Yeah.
Boy Scouts and everything.
So can we hope for you to come back in about 60 days with some things that we can decide on then?
Great.
Okay,
Okay, thanks.
thank you. Okay, next up, school calendar.
I don't know if you want me, because you are gonna do the presentation.
Yeah, Becky's
Okay.
doing that.
I have for the review the 18-19 school calendar that was in your packet. What I would say is this calendar is very similar to the current school calendar. There are a couple things that I would draw to your attention. One is on this year's school calendar, we had a couple more early release days with PD in the afternoon. So what that means is kids came half a day, and then the educators had professional development in the afternoon. And the committee felt that it was more productive to have full day PD days, also felt it was more productive for students to have a full day of school. So we did get rid of 2 early release PD days, and we made full professional development days. We also included an additional one at the beginning of the calendar. So if you look at what is being proposed for next year, we have 2 professional development days and then 2 plan days. And that is 1 more professional development day than we have right now. And educators, again, felt that that was, especially for next year, many of them felt that that would be good. There's going to be some new math curriculum, if I'm understanding right, and just felt that that time could be really valuable for them to have some extra time. Just a reminder, we cannot start with students before September 1st, so that's one of the reasons we were looking at putting some teacher days before that September 1 date. Then the other change would be, we really try to look at having an increased number of student contact days. The way this calendar fell, if we were going to have a similar number of minutes in this calendar as we did in the current calendar, it would mean adding 1 more day. Well, if you look at that calendar, adding 1 more day would be asking students to come back to school on a Monday in June. And the committee felt that that probably was not very productive, may not be a well-attended day. And so we did, this calendar would suggest that the last student day would be on a Friday and teachers would come back on that Monday for a work day. So this calendar does represent 6 hours less of instructional time for the total year than what the current is.
In, some of you may remember, we were restricted to days and minutes. They took the days out of legislation, so we now have to meet the number of minutes. This calendar also allows, we build in 2 snow days. So this calendar allows us to have 2 snow days without making them up. If we get to that third, then the number of minutes, we're closer, maybe short on the number of minutes, so we would have to add that. So we always build in some of those extra days in our minutes. So if we don't have any snow days, or as in this case right now, if we only have 1 snow day this year, we are still over minutes that we need because we build in extra minutes for the snow days.
We always calculate that based on the high school schedule, because that one is always the tightest. And besides those 2 snow days, the high school has 2 testing days, and what DPI would say is if all students aren't in the building, then you can't count that as an instructional day. So we have to take out, actually when we calculated this, we ended up taking out 4 days.
For the high school.
For the high school. So that means that River Bluff and the elementaries are going to be, they're going to be in real good shape with minutes. High school is in real good shape with minutes. It's just we always use that one as our test.
So there's 1 day that just juniors come to take the ACT. And so we can't count that as a day at the high school because it's just juniors. And there's 1 day that freshmen and sophomores come to take the, what's it called now, Judy? Aspire. They keep changing the name of it, which is kind of a pre-ACT. Because juniors and seniors aren't there, we cannot count that as a day at the high school.
So I think everything else was pretty much in your packet when you looked at the calendar. And we always have to have 190 educator days. It makes that. So if there's any questions, I had the list of committee members. It was a really good committee, a lot of discussion. We were all in agreement. So it's the calendar we would bring forward for you to consider.
So questions from anyone?
I would never start picking at the calendar.
Well, having been on that committee myself, I know it's like putting together a Rubik's Cube puzzle. It's a lot more complicated than you might think just looking at it.
Yoli Beth is new to this committee, and so we kind of gave her a crash course. And yeah, when you tried it, they just explained it all in one sitting. There's more to it than you give it credit.
One thing that I guess I would underline is I'm pretty sure that our parents are happy that there are 2 fewer half days than we've had in the past. That's, especially with the younger students, that can be really difficult to work that out. It's easier to deal with a whole day off than a half day.
Sure.
I said the same thing, yeah, I think that was a good thing of this calendar.
Okay. So if there are no other questions,
It will come back next
right,
meeting
we'll vote
for
on this
approval.
in 2 weeks.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Becky. Paul is going to give us a technology update.
Quizzing first? Where's the clicker?
All right, so I wanted to give you a technology update this evening. So I'm going to talk about the one-to-one Chromebook rollout, talk about some projects we have coming up, and then what's on the agenda next for us. So to kind of revisit the one-to-one Chromebook rollout, we really actually haven't talked about it since we actually did the rollout in fall, so I figured we'd start there. We have some celebrations, some challenges, and then some next actions with this initiative. So to start out with the celebrations, overall it was a pretty smooth rollout. We did have 2 different rollout strategies, one at River Bluff and one at the high school. We came to the rollout strategy by building a team of staff members, and they just look differently because buildings operate differently. So at River Bluff, what we did is we had all the Chromebooks placed in the classrooms on the first day of school, ready for the students. And they're all checked out, all assigned to them, so we account for all the Chromebooks. And we wanted to do a Chromebook boot camp for them, which kind of went over all the expectations, how to care for your Chromebook, how to clean them, how to be responsible users of the Chromebook. So we took a half day and did that with the River Bluff staff. At the high school, we actually had all the students, and you can see them in the photo in the lower right-hand corner. All the students came in during their language arts period. We did it over the course of 2 days, so it was a Thursday and Friday that first week of school. Students would come in by class. We would issue them a Chromebook, check it out to them. They'd be responsible for putting the case, and off they went. And that was actually a really smooth process too. So that went really well. Touched on the Chromebook boot camp at the high school. That piece just looked a little bit differently. We didn't have a whole half of a day to spend on expectations, so the assistant principals actually came up with a video that went over all the Chromebook expectations for the high school students. So they viewed that before they got the Chromebooks. Another celebration of student engagement, hearing from the staff at the high school in River Bluff. Students are really engaged. Every time I walk in the buildings, they're using their Chromebooks. Really, it's kind of we categorize it as an essential learning tool. It has just so much information with the internet and everything that we just see students using them all the time. Teachers really appreciate that there's a guaranteed access. Prior to the one-to-one, they had to go through the checkout process. Is the cart of Chromebooks available? How do I plan my lessons around that? And that just got cumbersome, and some teachers at that point just get frustrated with that process. So they really appreciate having that guaranteed access all the time. Our hotspot program is for those students that don't have internet access at home. That has gone really well for us so far. We were kind of hesitant about if we had enough hotspots. As it turns out, we actually do have enough hotspots. In the beginning, I think students were checking them out more frequently, thinking they could spend their time on YouTube or other things at home, and we were monitoring their activity, had some conversations with them and said, hey, this is for homework use only. It's really intended for students without internet access, and that kind of brought that down a little bit. So I think we're sitting about right where we want to be with that. And then lastly, our digital citizenship curriculum. This is not just for the one-to-one, but we did this K-12. It looks differently at the buildings. At an elementary level, in all of our library media specialists did all the work for this. They went out, they got the curriculum, they got an application called Nearpod that they deliver their curriculum through. At the K-5 buildings, we have library media specialists actually delivering the curriculum to the students. And then at 6 through 12, we actually train the teachers on Nearpod, and the teachers are then delivering the curriculum. So different levels of engagement. I think at high school, students have already seen this information, so it's kind of just repetitive for them. But what our goal was is to catch them early on. So at the elementary level, they're learning about how to be responsible users, learning about the dangers of the internet and how to be that good digital citizen. Over to the right-hand side is some of our challenges. I think really, by far, the challenges are getting the students in the habit of charging their Chromebooks at night, bringing them to class the next day charged. So that's the current challenge. At the high school specifically, there's some cords that are being lost. If they forget to charge it at home, they're trying to bring their cords with them, kind of lying around in the classrooms and libraries, so we're just trying to help clean them up. Next actions for this is to just kind of do the reverse process of giving all the students Chromebooks. We now need to collect all of them. So we're meeting right now to see how we're going to do that. Collect them, store them over the summer, and then we'll then again reissue them. We're also going to continue to look at instructional delivery. This was new for everybody. So our teachers are still trying to get used to the fact that Chromebooks are in the classrooms at all times. And we're trying to look at different ways on how we can just change up our instructional delivery. So we started off with one of our teams looking at that, and we hope to pick up where we left off in the summer and take a look at that again for next year. Chromebook support, just to give you a little bit of information, I would say by far the biggest questions from parents during central registration is what happens when they break, how do they get repaired, how do we know what my student is doing on the Chromebook. And so the left-hand side with the warranty program, we use a vendor called TRA, Technology Resource Advisors. It's 100% hardware coverage. The only thing that it doesn't cover is batteries and charging cords. But so far it's worked out pretty well. There's a few hiccups in the beginning just with getting all the logistics down, make sure the Chromebooks go back to the appropriate spot. But generally what the process is, if a student's Chromebook is damaged, what they do is they bring it to the library. The library media specialist checks it out, assesses it, submits a ticket to Technology Resource Advisors, and issues the student a loaner. So the student always has a Chromebook that they can use. Every Thursday, TRA comes and picks up the Chromebooks in a crate, brings them back to their office in Milwaukee, they do the repairs there, and then they return the following week. So that's worked out pretty well. I would say if a student, so they come Thursday, if a student breaks it on Friday, let's say, then it's 13 days without that Chromebooks. That's been a little bit of a challenge, but we always have the loaners there for them to use. We do have a hybrid approach in the program. What that means is, by far, our biggest repair is broken screens. And so one of our technicians in the district actually does the repair of the screens, but the vendor sends us those screens. So TRA sends us those screens. Our technician then repairs those screens on site, so those actually don't go out. Those are repaired in-house. And that's worked out really well because usually the student can get that Chromebook back within the next couple of days as opposed to up to 13 days. So that's been working out really well. Just to give you an example of what the repairs we're seeing, so far up to, I think I pulled this report last Thursday, we've had 275 repairs. So it's about a 16% breakage rate. That's right about where we see other districts. Actually, we're a little bit on the low end. They said usually it's about 20 to 25%. We're actually a little bit on the low end. We really attribute that to the cases we put on there. They're a nice bulky case. Students don't like them as much, but they really protect the Chromebook pretty well, and so that's why we see that lower breakage rate there. Of the 275 repairs, 133 of those were broken screens alone. So just about half of our repairs, or our damage, is those broken screens, which we anticipated. Students put their Chromebooks in their backpack, put the textbooks on top, it's going to crack the screen. Or you put a pencil in there, close it, put any kind of pressure on it, it's going to crack that screen. Over the right-hand side, we do use Securely to monitor online activity. This has been working well for us, both from a staff perspective as well as a family perspective. What Securely does is it monitors student Chromebook activity all the time. And so anytime that a teacher is wondering what the students are doing in their Chromebooks, we can always pull a report. The library media specialists are doing that currently. We're talking about branching it out into the counselors. We haven't done that yet. It's just the more people can do it, the more efficient that whole process is. A weekly notification goes out to families, letting them know what their homework or their online activity is at home. And it only gets generated if there's enough activities. So there's like 5 different areas. They can hit 3 of those areas in order for it to generate a report, and that gets emailed out to the families on a weekly basis. There's also flexible filtering at home. We haven't seen a whole lot of this, but families are able to adjust their filter at home. They will come with the district filter, so you can't lessen that, but you can always put more things on top of it if that family chooses to do that. Just a reminder, we do have more details, so if you have any questions about it, you're getting questions on the community, questions from families, everything that I just shared with you is listed at that URL down below. It's our website /Chromebooks, and there is just a wealth of information. There's our Chromebook handbook, the parent and guardian FAQs, placement costs, theft information, all that stuff is on that webpage. Here's just a graphic of the technology that we have seen that has been increased over the years. And so as you can see, we have a drastic uptake in technology, and obviously between last year and this year there is even more of an uptick there because of our one-to-one program. Actually, to get this off the ground, it wasn't that much of an investment because we've already had a lot of the Chromebooks that we already repurposed. So that's been really nice. And then from this point forward, it's just any incoming 6th grader is going to get a new Chromebook, and any incoming 9th grader will get a new Chromebook. Other new equipment, applications, and services that we've done since the last time I gave you an update. At Kegonsa, we replaced all of our smart boards that were aging with new smart panel TVs. That's been working out well over there. The main reason why we did it is because we had to start somewhere. And at Kegonsa in particular, the walls, they're walls, but they're pretty flimsy. They're actually like metal, I'll explain that, metal kind of stud walls. And anytime that a door would close or a student would stomp too hard or whatever, it would toss off the calibration of that smart board. So teachers found themselves recalibrating up to like 3 to 5 times a day. So we figured that would be a good place to start. So we did take down all the smart boards, all the projectors. We put up new smart panel TVs. Couple things that are nice about it. One, it's very low maintenance. So for us, we don't have to blow up projectors anymore. They're literally plug and play. You plug in your laptop and it comes up and it's completely interactive, as opposed to the smart boards where we have to do calibration. You have to make a connection to your computer to that smart board through a Bluetooth adapter. So that's been really nice. So we're going to check in with Kiganza staff here to see how well it's been going, any things that they're concerned about, and eventually the plan would be is to scale this out to our other buildings. It's going to look differently at our middle school and our high school. We just need to talk about that interaction piece. And so most of the time, teachers at that secondary level are using it as a projector system and less as an interactive piece. So we need to have some discussions with the staff there to see if they need that. But the elementary, I think this is a good fit. The plan would be to scale that out to the other elementaries for sure. We put in some document cameras recently in the elementary schools. It really aligns well with our math and our literacy curriculum where students can show their work. And so it's been really nice for them. We just installed, I'd say, 20 of them about 2 weeks ago. All of our math classes at the middle school and high school already had them as part of their curriculum. So we're seeing an increase in document cameras as well. We refreshed our teacher laptop at River Bluff and Sand Hill. We started laptops about 4 years ago, and those are on a 4-year rotation cycle, so it's time for those buildings to get that refresh. We then will go to Kiganza and Fox Prairie the following year, and then eventually go to high school for that. We put in a new learning management system. It's called Schoology. So teachers are starting to use that more and more. And we will be meeting with the high school staff and River Bluff staff to kind of do a check-in on that as well. How's it going? What's working well? What's not working? So we can continue that use there as well. PD repository, it's a program called Who Knew It. The idea there was that with all this new technology, we wanted a spot for staff to be able to go to so they could learn new skills at their own time. And so it's available to them. Over the summer, we had teachers, as part of our summer academy, develop a whole bunch of PDs. There's Schoology and a bunch of other applications that we had coming in, and staff have online access to that 24/7. And then also we upped our internet speed to 1 gig. So we increased that speed from 500 megs up to 1 gig over the summer. So we have plenty of bandwidth to last us. Although last time I said that it was only 2 years, and we're creeping up there again. So hopefully this will last us longer than that. We have a big project coming up. So we are actually going to replace all of our network switches throughout the district. We allocated for this, we budgeted for this for this year. And we're also utilizing E-rate for it as well. I'll explain that when we get to the funding. So we're breaking up into 2 phases. The first phase is we're going to replace all the network switches throughout the entire district. So that means district office and all 5 of our school buildings. We plan to do that over spring break. So we're hoping to get that accomplished in that 1 week time period. If not, we're going to start at the core and try not to get too technical here, but there's kind of, if you look at it, there's like the brains of the switches, and then there's edge switches that kind of communicate with that. So at the very least, we're going to get the brains swapped out over spring break, but we hope to do it all. Replace all the patch cables in those network closets, and we're going to enhance the network security. What I mean by that is we're going to close up any loopholes that might be available. If there's open ports, we want to prevent people from just plugging in their any laptop or any personal laptop to that. We want to make sure it says one of the districts, and if it's not one of the districts, it sends it to a different network. So we're going to kind of close up some loopholes there as well with phase 1. In addition, we're going to do a wireless building survey, meaning we're going to go through each building and ensure that we not only have coverage in all classrooms, but we have that density built in, because the more technology we bring in, the more access points you have available. And so we're going to do a survey to see if we need to add any spots. And then phase 2 will happen over the summer. We're going to replace and add any wireless access points, replace all existing one, and then based upon that wireless building survey, we're going to add any wireless access points at that point. We're going to replace all old cabling and run new cabling to all our new access points. So it's all built into, which leads me into the funding, it's all built into E-rate. So the way, I don't know if you're familiar with how E-rate works, but it's a federal program designated to schools and libraries. And historically, it's always been used to pay for internet and phone service. a couple years ago, the feds got together and said, this doesn't make any sense. We're paying for old technology. We're paying to subsidize telephones, and that's not really new technology. So what they did is they recategorized the funding, and they called it Category 1 and Category 2. Category 1 is consisting of internet access and phone service. And the phone service was going to deplete by 20% each year until you're at 0%, which then freed up some money for a Category 2, which is for all network type equipment. It used to be that you have to have a free reduced rate of like 90% almost to qualify for it. They made it available to all school districts. So we took full advantage of that. And I applied last year to replace all of our network equipment with the new federal administration that came in. We were just a bit unsure about how long that money was going to be there. So we decided to apply for it last year. We were funded for this year. And what happened is they covered 50% of our costs. So it's about a $500,000 project, and they covered $250,000 of it. We then pay $250,000 of it. So all of that stuff should last us. What we're shooting for is about 7 to 10 years. 7 would be an appropriate cycle out if funding is available, but we plan it as though so it can hopefully last us through 10 years if needed. So that was super helpful for that to kind of offset those costs. So what's coming up? Just three basic points here. Windows 10, currently we're on Windows 7, we're upgrading to Windows 10 this summer. So that will be a big project for us. We already had that started, we have a base image built. Our next plan is to send that base image out to some of our staff that have been willing to test it out for us to work out all the bugs. And then we'll go ahead and re-image everybody's laptops and desktops with this summer to Windows 10. So that will be a big project for us. Number 2 is student security. We're always focusing on that, and not just brick and mortar, but also cybersecurity. So what are we going to do for student cybersecurity? About 2 weeks ago, our admin team took a look at a product called Gaggle. And what Gaggle does is they monitor student activity all the time, and they look for words like suicide, bullying, anything profanity, and they categorize it. So if it's kind of on their low level of how they categorize it, they send an email to the student and say, hey, knock it off. The second level would be a little bit more extreme, where they're going to contact somebody in the school. We would have it set up so it would either be a counselor or a principal. They contact somebody, and within, I think it's within one school day. And the top tier is that we hear some things like suicide. They call us immediately, 24/7 around the clock. There's a case study that happened in the Wausau School District where a student was actually in the bathroom typing up a suicide letter. And within minutes, they had called the administration. Administration deployed some teams down to the bathroom and saved that student's life. So that's kind of the case study that they use. Something we're looking at. It is costly. We're trying to see if it can work within our budget, but that's something we're looking to do. And then cybersecurity training and awareness. This is for all staff, all students. The incident that we experienced in December, that really comes down to awareness and training. So what to look for if you're sent an email, what to click on, what not to click on. We'll never ask for your username and password, stuff like that we want to implement, and we want to provide some training and awareness around that. After looking at things that have happened, that was the #1 recommendation to us, is awareness, because a lot of it you can't really prevent. It's just letting people know what's out there. So those are just at a high level. Those are the 3 big things we're looking at moving into next year. So with that, I will take any questions you might have.
Steve. Okay, a couple questions. First on the cybersecurity, do you think we need a policy, or do you think training is good enough? We currently, I don't think we have a policy on cybersecurity.
No, we don't. I mean, it's certainly something that we could look into. I wonder if any other districts have a policy like that. I haven't really considered it.
Okay.
I mean, anything that, we have that acceptable use policy, which do this, can't do that type of thing.
Getting to your point about what's acceptable, what to click on, what not to click on, and
That would be, I think that would be more of like a training piece.
Okay.
Because it's going to evolve as new threats come home. So I think that would be more of a training piece. But if you want to look into any policies districts might have out there, just going to sense.
Might be helpful.
Some research. Sure.
I just think about where I work. We have a policy on cybersecurity, and it's a step like fishing exercises
Yeah.
and the whole, how it, how all that would work, so.
Okay.
Can I keep going? or-
Yeah, go ahead.
Can you talk about how the 4K program fits in with your technology update? Because,
Sure.
I mean, it's part of,
Sure,
part and
absolutely.
parcel, so.
So, through a contract that we have with 4K sites in the district, it actually says that we provide 1 computer per site. And I looked at that and I said, we're gonna actually supply 1 computer per classroom. And so what we do right now is we supply 1 computer per classroom for all 4K sites. Some of them use them, some of them don't, and it is a desktop. And so some of the concerns are wireless infrastructure, is not wireless, but that's what we currently provide to them. And in terms of, there's not been a contract for us to find internet access, although we do supply internet access to St. Anne's because it's there. Martin Luther, because that's one of our old buildings, so the infrastructure was there. And Pumpkin Patch is, I believe they have their own internet for some things, but their 4K machines are on our network. So I think they have 2 feeds actually coming into the Pumpkin Patch. All the other sites do not get internet access from us.
So the training and everything else is gonna be district-wide, including?
Yeah, when we
4K
get to that
sites?
point, we'll take a look at who's involved, how it's delivered, where it's delivered, if it's going to be virtually, if it's going to be online, or if it's going to be face-to-face. We haven't gotten into any of those details.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm not sure how that's going to look exactly yet.
I got 2 more.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Did we ever figure out what the network outage cause was? I mean, maybe you don't want to talk about it right now, but.
Oh, no.
Okay.
Yeah, to actually nail down exactly what it was is really difficult to do without doing extensive forensic work.
Okay.
Could we have gone down that path? Yeah, we could have, but my take on it was, for the amount of money we've spent doing that forensic work, I would much rather put that into the awareness and training piece, because once you add that, like, who clicked on the email, 99% of the time, it's somebody clicking on an attachment of an email, which then runs a script, which then would get a virus infiltrated. So that's the approach that I took, is instead of saying, okay, we figured out who it was, we're going to invest money into that training and awareness.
Lastly, I was at a River Bluff Parent Action Network. It's a new group, kind of, I don't know what the right word is, but the working for kids. Yeah, just kind of reframing themselves, I guess. Facebook and social media, or not Facebook, it was generally social media, but Facebook was talked about, is one of their top concerns. So, are we able to track, so what was said was, we gotta stop any social media from being used in the school, so we're gonna start working towards that as a group.
Okay.
And I thought, whoa, wait, we've had conversations and how difficult that is, so just curious, can parents find out if their kids have used social media on a Google Chromebook?
What it would tell you is that they visited Facebook.com, but it would not give you any of the activity that they've done.
Okay.
Unless they created their Facebook account with their district email.
Okay.
Then it would pick up on posts.
Okay.
Most of the time, students don't do that, but every once in a while, we'll see those come through our activity report.
Okay.
So
Activity report most likely won't capture all of those.
correct.
Okay.
Yes. The only way it was that they used their district account
Okay.
to create it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Anyone else? John?
You mentioned Gaggle, or
Yeah.
looking into Gaggle, and the way you described it, it sounded like it's sort of persistently scanning for keywords,
Yep, exactly.
patterns. But I missed what services it is scanning that does that?
Oh, yeah, great question. So it does anything that's district issued, so that would include Google Drive, or anything Google, which is the majority of what we use, so that includes Gmail, Google Drive, it can do Google Hangouts chats for an extra fee, so that's kind of like in addition to.
Do you know how much kids use Google Hangouts in our district?
I think it varies.
Mine uses it.
Yeah, I mean.
You don't have to get, you don't have to get caught up on that.
We don't monitor the activity unless it affects it.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure. I mean, I do hear teachers saying it can be a distraction in the classroom. I know some teachers use it for educational purposes, to communicate with their students. But
I was mostly curious because I just assumed they were using their own personal.
yeah,
social
no,
media
there are.
stuff.
Yeah, also there's a fair amount that
Okay.
use it. Yeah.
So, sorry, you mentioned all Google products.
Yep.
Anything else?
So, back to Steve's question about social media, if they use their district account, how it works is, like on Facebook, if you post something and somebody replies to your post, you can have it set up for email notifications. If they use it for their district account, or if they sign up through, let's just take Facebook for example, if they sign up through Facebook with their district account, any email notifications would be captured. But that's the only way. They can't inject it into like Facebook, Instagram, Snap.
So, if you guys end up finding out more about that and it becomes a product that the school district is interested in, could you, whenever you end up presenting it to school board, could you bring some sort of detailed examples of the type of content that it would actually red flag and send out messages for?
Yeah.
I'm most curious about. I mean, if it's something that, if it's scanning systems that we typically, or that the kids are typically using for school anyways, I'm curious what the examples are of the types of behavior that it's going to ping and flag, and that the district's going to, where the district would get value in that.
Sure. Yeah.
Thanks.
Anyone else? Joe?
So to Chromebooks, when we first talked about rolling these out, and we talked about repairs, it seemed, I kind of remember that we were talking about students might be involved in doing some of those repairs, and I thought it was specifically screens. Is that something that we're doing?
We actually did do training with Chris Mackey's class at River Bluff Middle School. He had one class that I believe it was a hardware type class. So myself and Roger, one of our technicians, went in class and trained the students. It didn't go, they didn't actually implement it. And I think the reason for that is because there's not that many of them. And so our technician is able to cover those. But I did tell Chris if he was interested to work out with Mandy Schechter, our media specialist. But I can follow up with them to see if they in fact did implement that, or if we're still repairing them. But we did go in and train the students.
Yeah, well, at the time, it sounded interesting to me, but maybe it turned out to be very boring for the students.
Well,
I have no
we
idea.
also talked about the possibility of having a student at the high school specifically dedicated to that an hour. And after reaching out to some of my counterparts, they say that there's just not enough work for the student.
Mm-hmm.
So we didn't go that route when we were monitoring, and right now it seems that we're able to keep up just fine. So we actually didn't go that route to high school for that reason as well.
Okay. And then I had a question, if I could, for Isabel, who wrote an article in the North Star when these first came out, and they were less than enthusiastically received by some folks at that time, it sounded like. How has it been going since? I mean, are students
Yeah, I wanted to ask
generally
that
pleased
too.
at this point?
Yeah, I feel like people have gotten used to them and kind of gotten over the, like, oh, these, like, poor Chromebooks, you know. I think that people have kind of gotten over that. And, I don't know, I mean, I see people using them all the time, and not even just in class. I know it's been really helpful for me, so I think, I haven't really heard people complain about them in a long time, so hopefully my article helps people.
That's a pretty good article.
That was the point.
Yeah, I think it was probably a hard transition for some students that may have had like a MacBook Air or something like that, given this Chromebook.
Yeah.
But I think after they say, okay, identify this with school, and they can save some of their, wear and tear on the MacBook Air. I think at least that's how we envisioned, because we knew that would be not really concerned, but kind of like the feeling of, oh, thanks for this 3-year-old Samsung Chromebook, you know, the regular MacBook Air at home or that I can use. But I think it does save the wear and tear, bringing that MacBook Air to and from school to actually have a device. It really does.
Good, thank you.
Yeah, Yuli?
I have a few questions too. One is about the hotspots that I know you kind of commented that in the beginning there were a lot of kids asking for it. So now it's about how many kids are using it, and how do they apply for it? Like, not everybody, of course.
Sure.
'Cause,
Yeah, so we do have consent forms for them to make sure that the parents know that they're bringing home internet. And so it's just one form that they sign, and all the logistics are done through a library media specialist. So I'm not actually involved in the check-in, check-out process, but I know that they do a little bit differently. At the high school, I think just come in as long as that form is signed. They issue the hotspots when available, and I think they're able to check them out. Is it a nightly basis, or is it?
Yeah, I think it's nightly. I actually checked one out one time,
Did you? Okay.
and they work really well. It even worked while we were like driving somewhere.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Really great.
So and then so it sounds like it's just a nightly checkout. Come back in, check back in, and they need it again, then check out again. So
Oh, okay.
we did that because it used to be when we didn't have the one-to-one, they could check out for a week. But if students are in need, we couldn't let students have it for a full week. So we just had a nightly checkout. So that's how they get it. In terms of how much they're being used, I could run some reports if you're interested. We get flags, so we get emails saying when the monthly limit has been reached and they have no more data left on them, and I rarely get those. I don't think they're being, I think we have more than enough, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
My question comes basically is thinking about the kids that really need to use it or use the hotspot. I mean, if they are really getting those access, do they have access to it? Do they know that they can do it, or they can check it out and all that? That's why I was asking.
Yeah, I think especially with the one-to-one, I think students are more than aware that service is available to them. Not to say that at some points in the beginning of the year, some students weren't turned away, because I know that did happen on occasion. But now, again, I think we're at a point where when a student is in need, they are available for them.
In River Bluff, I mean, have you seen?
Yeah, I haven't heard of anything. I rarely get those monthly limits, and so I think they are available for the students. Yeah.
Good. Okay. My other question was more about the security. Like, I do receive the security report or something for my son, and I can check it out. But do you have any families or that have had any concern about that security or something? Because
No,
I think it's working really well.
Yeah, no, I haven't had any concerns over it, just appreciation for that.
Oh, good.
See what your students are doing. A few questions about, hey, I didn't get an activity report this week, why not? And just the response of, there's those 5 categories, and if your student isn't hitting at least 3 of those, it's not an activity to generate that report. That was probably the most common question that I've received, but I haven't had any concerns over it.
Great. And then any, are we concerned about any virus or something like that? Like what happened with our system?
Yeah.
Like you were saying, well, somebody got an email, opened it up and spread it out. Do we have any concern about that with the?
It's always a concern. It always is a concern, and unfortunately, I feel like it always will be a concern. It's just our reality that there's these cyber threats, and unfortunately, they're only increasing. However, I feel like we were in a good position when that did hit our network, but now it's in an even better position to prevent that from happening. Nothing is 100% bulletproof, but we do all have all the precautions technology standpoint, awareness and training is the next phase of that. So physically everything's in place, but then there's that,
Sure.
that awareness and training component as well. So that's what we're going to be focusing on.
My last question.
Sure.
I see that we are changing, and we are gonna have to be doing that all the time, changing networks and changing machines and all that. Do we have like a recycling program, or what do we do with all that? Is the company you sign in with?
Yep. So we use Cisco products. In doing that, Cisco they actually give us a refund for our old equipment. And so what happens when they come and implement the new stuff, oftentimes they'll take the old stuff with them. There are cases where they leave it because they have no use for it because it's old and they just don't want it. If that is the case and it is left behind, we just recycle. We have a recycling company that will come in and in some instances give us money for this, but most time it's so outdated that they just recycle it for us. So yeah, we do use a recycling program if Cisco doesn't take it.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Oh, Allison.
And everyone has pretty much asked all the questions that I had. But one thing I was thinking when you were talking about having a policy, the first thing that popped up to me was kind of what you just said, that it's increasing and everything is changing. I wonder if we would have a meaningful policy that would be general enough yet specific enough given the way everything changes. And I'm not sure, it just seems like the ongoing training is more
Yeah, and
useful.
that's, you've been around long enough to know that one of the things the policy committee's been doing the last few years is to try to slim the written policies down. So a lot of what used to be in policies now in guidelines, those can be changed very, very quickly. They don't have to go to the board for a two-step vote, et cetera. And I appreciate what Steve is saying, but I suspect that to put something in the guidelines would be more nimble to deal with what you're raising, Allison, than if we actually had it in a policy that, we can only bring it up so many times.
Yeah, I mean, just thinking off the top of my head here, something that we could add to a guideline would be that they go through this cybersecurity training on an annual basis, something like that. But I can look further into it to see what other districts may have out there.
Sure.
I don't know what you have at your company, Steve, but if you want to pass along that, I'd be happy to take a look at it.
They probably wouldn't allow me to.
Oh, they would, yeah. Okay, fair enough. So yeah, I mean, we can always look down that road. I don't think it's a bad idea at all.
Anybody else? Okay, thanks, Paul.
Thank you very much.
All right, and then, last up, sorry, Kelly. I think you've got the longest drive home tonight, too.
I do. It's gonna take an hour or so.
Oh, boy.
That's okay. My husband let me use his SUV today.
Okay,
so
good.
That's a good thing. I'm like, I'm taking it today. So, I'm going to talk just a little bit about adverse childhood experiences. We kind of touched on it last year a little bit, but I just wanted to go a little bit more in depth on the topic. So, really, I'm a learner. I'm not an expert in any of this information. So I provide you some resources on my learning around adverse childhood experience. I already have it. You'll hear it being stated as ACEs a lot. All you have to do in a Google search is type ACEs, and you will get a plethora of information. So, but a great source, these are all linked on the presentation. So the trauma modules are right on the DPI website. Great information that we're using for professional development for our teachers. The original study is also linked, as well as the books that I have found so helpful are listed on there if you guys want some really light reading. And it's worthwhile reading, so it's on Audible, so I listen to those on my way home from work. So the definition of trauma is threefold. So it isn't just any time an individual has had an event
event in their life. It's their also response to that. So it's exposure to an event that threatens a person, but it also overwhelms that person's ability to respond, and it creates significant difficulty in functioning afterwards. So that would be, you have to have all those components to say this person has experienced childhood trauma. So the types of trauma, they're all listed. So an example of an acute trauma would be like a tornado, a violent event, fire, anything like that. That's a one-time situation. Complex trauma would be more about neglect, abuse, maybe some stressors of poverty, but again, that depends on the response. Can they function? And then it's historical trauma, or they call it generational trauma. That would be our American Indian, our people of color who have had, you're talking about slavery, things like that. There's a huge connection there, and actually research is showing it is changing some of the genetic composition, the genes in those populations. So the ACEs survey, there's a link to look at it, and it's questions like, when it was first given, things like prior to your 18th birthday, did a parent or other adult swear at you, insult you, put you down, humiliate you? So here's a list of the questions that were asked in the original study. So, and every time you would answer yes, you would get a 1 point to that, to your score. We can talk about that. So, and I'll talk a little bit more about the study in a couple of minutes, but the data that it revealed was that if there is a direct link between childhood trauma and the adult onset of chronic disease, and this is what I found out, I think, a few weeks ago when I was putting this together, ACEs usually don't happen in isolation. That almost 2/3 of the participants experience it. I knew that about 70%, we can assume, of people in our population have had at least one adverse childhood experience. But of that 2/3, 87% have experienced 2 or more types. So they don't come in isolation. The more adverse childhood experience you have, the higher your risk of medical, social, or mental problems as an adult. The prevalence is all listed here, and the original study really began in an obesity clinic, and the person who started wondering about why people were successfully losing weight, but then they were dropping out of the study, and he couldn't figure out why. So then he started to ask some of these questions and dig further into the data, and then he's like, wow, there's this huge connection to adverse childhood experiences for these people. So he presented at a psychology conference, and Kaiser, the center, Kaiser was part of that group, and then the Center for Disease Control furthered the study, and then they added the amount of people. So that was the original study, but then a lot of states have repeated that study and found similar things about the prevalence of childhood trauma. So a summary of there's really 2 major points, is that adverse childhood experiences are very common. 2/3 or 70% reported at least 1 ACE, and 1 in 5 reported 3 or more ACEs. And that's really important when you have more than one, because there is a dose-response relationship between ACEs and the negative effects from those ACEs. So that means the more ACEs, the higher your ACE scores, the higher your chance of developing heart disease, alcoholism, drug use. A lot of it is things like diabetes, the autoimmune diseases really come. So your chances go up with every ACE that you have. And here's just some things you guys can read that, some of the things that they have found the risk increases for. As to ACEs in school performance, traumatized children are 2.5 times more likely to fail a grade in school. They score lower on standardized achievement. They have more struggles in receptive and expressive language, are expelled and suspended more often, and more frequently placed in special ed. Social emotional problems is also very prevalent. So I added this as a link. I don't know if any of you had a chance to watch. I was just going to play a couple of clips because this woman was so eloquent and really summarized ACEs very well. I don't know if any of you had a chance. Did you watch it?
It blew my mind. I mean,
Yeah.
it just makes so
She's
much
amazing.
sense.
Yeah, and the ideas she gave, she just presented the whole thing very well.
In the mid-90s, the CDC and Kaiser Permanente discovered an exposure that dramatically increased the risk for 7 out of 10 of the leading causes of death in the United States. In high doses, it affects brain development, the immune system, hormonal systems, and even the way our DNA is read and transcribed. Folks who are exposed in very high doses have triple the lifetime risk of heart disease and lung cancer, and a 20-year difference in life expectancy. And yet doctors today are not trained in routine screening or treatment. Now, the exposure I'm talking about is not a pesticide or packaging chemical. It's childhood trauma. Okay, what kind of trauma am I talking about here? I'm not talking about failing a test or losing a basketball game. I am talking about threats that are so severe or pervasive that they literally get under our skin and change our physiology. Things like abuse or neglect, or growing up with a parent who struggles with mental illness or substance dependence. Now, for a long time, I viewed these things in the way I was trained to view them, either as a social problem, refer to social services, or as a mental health problem, refer to mental health services.
Just pause it there. So you can watch more of it, but this part.
And ultimately, my career. Two things. Number one, ACEs are incredibly common. 67% of the population had at least one ACE. And 12.6%, 1 in 8, had 4 or more ACEs. The second thing that I found was that there was a dose-response relationship between ACEs and health outcomes. The higher your ACE score, the worse your health outcomes. For a person with an ACE score of 4 or more, their relative risk of chronic obstructive pulmonary disease was 2.5 times that of someone with an ACE score of 0. For hepatitis, it was also 2.5 times. For depression, it was 4.5 times. For suicidality, it was 12 times. A person with an ACE score of 7 or more had triple the lifetime risk of lung cancer and 3.5 times the risk of ischemic heart disease, the #1 killer in the United States of America. Well, of course, this makes sense. You know, some people look at this data and they said, come on, you have a rough childhood, you're more likely to drink and smoke and do all these things that are going to ruin your health. This isn't science. This is just bad behavior. It turns out this is exactly where the science comes in. We now understand, better than we ever have before, how exposure to early adversity affects the developing brains and bodies of children. It affects areas like the nucleus accumbens, the pleasure and reward center of the brain that is implicated in substance dependence. It inhibits the prefrontal cortex, which is necessary for impulse control and executive function, a critical area for learning. And on MRI scans, we see measurable differences in the amygdala, the Brain Sphere Response Center. So there are real neurologic reasons why folks exposed to high doses of adversity are more likely to engage in high-risk behavior. And that's important to know. But it turns out that even if you don't engage in any high-risk behavior, you're still more likely to develop heart disease or cancer. The reason for this has to do with the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, the brain's and body's stress response system that governs our fight or flight response. How does it work? Well, imagine you're walking in the forest and you see a bear. Immediately, your hypothalamus sends a signal to your pituitary, which sends a signal to your adrenal gland. It says, release stress hormones, adrenaline, cortisol. And so your heart starts to pound, your pupils dilate, your airways open up, and you are ready to either fight that bear or run from the bear. And that is wonderful if you're in a forest and there's a bear. But the problem is what happens when the bear comes home every night. And this system is activated over and over and over again. And it goes from being adaptive or life-saving to maladaptive or health damaging. Children are especially sensitive to this repeated stress activation because their brains and bodies are just developing. High doses of adversity not only affect brain structure and function, they affect the developing immune system, developing hormonal systems, and even the way our DNA is read and transcribed. So for me, this information...
I'll just stop it there. That gives you, she just describes it so well, and I encourage you to watch the rest of it. So, what does this have? Does this have anything to do with us? So, a lot of people say, inner city, you know, violence, they're going to see all this, but in the actual study, it was 17,000 adults. Of those 17,000 adults, 74.8% were white, 84.9% were ages 40 and higher, and if you, I mean, close to 80% or 75% had at least some college, if not college graduates. So it has everything to do with all of us. She goes on to say that a lot of us would probably raise our hand if we started asking those questions, so it does have a lot to do with us. So what can we do? Here are just some of the recommendations that DPI provides in its trauma-informed modules to support our students and families through this trauma-informed lens. Right now, we're working on creating a trauma-sensitive school with, we have a Compassionate Schools team, and trying to begin a plan to support its implementation. And really what they talk about is more of a shift in your attitude and your understanding of people and children. So straight from DPI, when they're working with us and helping coaching and supporting us, their three major statements are children will do well if they can, families will do well if they can, and staff will do well, teachers will do well if they can. So we need to make the assumption that at least 70% of children in each of our classrooms has had at least one adverse childhood experience, and probably their families too. And we have to start saying to our children, instead of saying, well, what's wrong with you, we have to say what happened to you and how can I help you. That's the major components of what a trauma-informed school is. So right now, we're working in the categories that DPI has kind of talked through, the positive school culture. There was training for responsive classrooms. We've had training for Nurtured Heart. We're doing some coaching around Nurtured Heart implementation. Working on collaborative problem solving with our students. Building relationships. We've had professional development on staff care and well-being. really stressing the importance of relationships with our students and each other to help support all of us. Social thinking is a way to teach kids how to interact with each other and then how to solve problems. What are some of the expected behaviors? What are some unexpected behaviors, and how can we solve problems in the most flexible way? We've done a lot around regulation. Mindfulness, zones of regulation, yoga are all things that are part of that trauma-informed lens looking at that regulation. We've provided professional development. We have building bridges and to build bridges and help support families in getting the supports they need in the community, as well as help our staff understand that trauma-informed more. Community school connections, our compassionate school team has 3 subgroups right now. One is really looking at social emotional competencies and what we're doing to help support our learners reach that social emotional competency, and professional development, a group working on professional development, and then the 3rd group is working on community connections. So how can we build those connections with the community to help support us? And then also we have DPI coming in for some trauma-sensitive support. We're coaches. We have an external coach who are training internal coaches. So we're working towards that and trying to establish that compassionate schools with that trauma lens. So just a brief summary and question.
Go ahead, Steve.
Thanks, Kelly. I appreciate this information. And I took the ACEs test at the WASB conference. I sat in on a session, and you know who gave it was, what's her name? She's just recently was elected senator in St. Croix County area. I can't remember her name. Anyway, she was great. So, couple thoughts. I know it's hard to share the specific information that we gather within the district, right? Because a lot of it's HIPAA, is that right? It's kind of managed by HIPAA. However, I also sat in on a evening program back in January where the Dane County Youth Assessment was shared.
Yeah.
That was amazing. So my question, I guess, is do we promote, because that survey, the last time it was done in 2015, it's going to be done in 2018.
We just completed the
We just completed it. Oh,
Yep.
okay.
Yep.
Well, my question was around, do we promote that? Do we actively promote
Yep.
it?
All the kids had links, and yes, they did that.
Okay, so,
Our school counselors provided the links, and we had them up on our website, so yes.
do we
kids were
know
given
what
time.
our participation rate is?
I don't, I just got the results like today
Okay.
or yesterday, and I haven't looked at it yet, so.
Will we be able to, as a board, learn a little bit about
I think so.
some of those results?
We can compile those.
That was
Because
ve-
it's not, there's no personal
No.
identifying information
Yeah, that
on
was,
there at
that
all.
was very,
Yeah.
very interesting,
Mhm.
and this just makes a lot of sense.
Mhm.
So thanks for sharing.
Mhm.
And the district's doing a lot already to,
We're also
Work
looking at
forces.
the possibility of CBITS, which is a screener for trauma, provided to 6th graders. And then they have follow-up on what that screening showed. And then Face Kids, which is a Catholic Charities group, comes in and provides some support for those kids. So
thank you.
that's just another piece, another screening.
John?
I guess this is a question probably more for Dr. Onsager. As our district becomes better educated in this and develops more plans and strategies for assisting students and families with trauma, is this something that we could sort of take a lead in our community in communicating so that the rest of Stoughton, including people who are not part of our school system and might not be as directly or as likely to receive some sort of training or education could understand it. I mean, I could even
Right.
see the district trying to start, I don't know, packaging up short things for distribution in the hub or something.
We're
just so
starting
people
to do some of
understand.
that, we're focusing internally first. Kelly has shared this same presentation with the
The
Wellness
Stoughton Wellness
Coalition.
Coalition. So, and then
Right.
we've talked about possibly some community,
Mhm.
community forums to,
Mhm.
to present this information.
Yeah, because I mean, this is, I agree with Steve that all of this makes so much sense, and it's even hard as a 30-year-old to wrap my head around, so I imagine that since we do have an older community compared to the rest of Dayton County, I can imagine that this is maybe something that just hasn't been on people's radar, and it would be really good to get the rest of the community, especially our taxpayers, to understand that this is real stuff, and it can, I don't know, help us be more sensitive to
And it's
meet our
shocking because
kids.
it's not the ACES survey originally came out in the late 1990s.
Mhm.
So it's been repeated more
Right.
recently.
Mhm.
But
Right.
Yeah, go ahead, Allison.
I know, and I think when we've talked about this before, my question has always been, what do we do for the community to understand it too? And it's just like an example that I can think of is I don't really have a lot of training in any of this, but it's interesting when I feel like things are going wrong at the park or something like that, the instant reaction of most of the adults that are present is to somehow say, well, that kid, you know how it is. And it's, I'll usually just try to deal with the situation, and then once everybody's sort of calmed down, kind of explain, we don't always know where this stuff comes from, and everybody reacts to stress in different ways. And lots of times, people, you hear this a lot too, where, well, this happened to all these other people too, and they don't act like that. It's like, well, but there's other things that you may not know about. So I think community education, and we've talked about it before, I just think that's also important.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, we've all gotten the emails from people who've said, my granddaughter told me about this terrible thing that happened at school, and why is this tolerated, et cetera. I mean, we've all gotten those. And I think that to the extent we can, it would be really good to try to educate the broader community on, it isn't just because a kid's ill-behaved. There's something that causes that to happen.
and how we respond
Right.
and it doesn't look like the typical discipline. You did something wrong, you're going to get a consequence. The responses are different, and those responses are more effective
Right.
than just the consequence punishment.
Yoli?
I want to thank you for really doing all what you've been doing since you got to the district with all this compassionate schools and all that. I want to comment on my experience, what I have seen at my kids' school, that, they change by implementing this. I can see it. I can see that kids have been responding better to what the teacher have been implementing in the classroom. And I really feel really happy about that, because it's the same thing that we're talking. You hear people saying, well, why don't we take the child out of the classroom, interrupting the others? And it breaks my heart. It does. And it's hard to explain. And I also agree that we do need to have more of teaching our community. And whatever we can do, either posting things in our webpage, little messages or something that we can come up to let other people know and understand what are we doing. Even showing this has been, the incident has been reduced by this many. So something like that.
Yeah.
but thank you.
Joe, did you have a question?
Yeah, so again, thank you for all of this. You're doing amazing things. And I know as a district that we're pretty careful with our money, and it's a good thing, but I guess I'm wondering, do we have enough people dedicated to this? Or do we need more? Because this is going to increase over time as the trend. And
One of the things,
it's a tough question to
right.
ask, but.
We'll have this discussion on next board meeting when we talk about staffing. And some of our staffing recommendations keep this in mind to free up other people to do this work. And so we'll have more of an in-depth discussion on that next week. But to your point, we've talked about that. We've talked about it, and our staffing recommendations are with that in mind. So that we can free up people to do this work, people that are trained to do this work, so that we're not always in the reactive mode, we're doing more proactive as well.
And that's why I asked, because I think we've got a lot of really great ideas, and we've identified a lot of things that need work. And if we can just staff it and start to turn that corner.
Plus, it's also not just about adding people, it's also about coaching and building the capacity of our teachers who are in the trenches every day.
Yeah,
So, I mean, I've got a couple coaches working at a school, really supporting how we're gonna respond to some of the outbursts, how we're gonna respond differently to our kids that we know have had significant trauma. And it's creating change, and they're seeing, if I respond differently, the student will respond differently, and then we can keep moving them forward. So it's kind of like that twofold thing. We also have to help our teachers build their capacity in how they can respond differently and change that too, so.
Right, and obviously you know way more about it than I do, and if you don't think we need staff, I would completely trust whatever your recommendations are. It's just a question that kind of came to mind.
Yeah, for sure.
And I don't know, please correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't the co-teaching kind of one way of doing what you're just saying? That,
Right.
and I don't know if you can explain a little bit more about the co-teaching that.
I'll let Kelly explain the co-teaching model because it's fallen under her.
Well, sometimes it's more that collaborative planning and two people being able to be in a classroom switching roles, but sometimes it's planning that lesson so it meets a greater variety of needs in that classroom. So, and then they can build each other's capacity. So someone who maybe isn't trained, such as a reading specialist or an EL teacher or a learning strategist, they can work and another teacher can watch how they respond. So if you have that kind of relationship, you're building capacity through that co-teaching.
But it also goes beyond just our teachers. It's sometimes working with an educational assistant hand in hand and working also to increase their capacity and their training and modeling some different things. And so it's working side by side so that they are, it's not one referring to the other, it's how do we work together. We have instructional coaches and we have other people, coaches, just like you do on an athletic team or other things. They're building them up, they're building their skills and their capacity so that they can step away and the person can continue by themselves.
I'm very excited about seeing for next year how the fourth grade co-teaching went in Piganza and Housing.
Okay, anyone else? Thanks very much, Kelly. I appreciate it. All right, we have one discussion action item tonight regarding the supplemental pay for the SEA. Can I get a motion?
I move to approve the Employee Relation Committee's recommendation for supplemental pay to bargaining unit members represented by the Stoughton Educational Association, retroactive to July 1st, 2017, for the 2017-18 school year as follows. No supplemental pay to 2017-2018 new hires to the district. Supplemental pay to educators in the initial professional level of $1,105 minus the base wage increase. Supplemental pay to educators in the collaborative professional level of $1,261 minus the base wage increase. Supplemental pay to educators in the innovative professional level of $1,463 minus the base wage increase. Supplemental pay to educators in the system professional level of $1,664 minus the base wage increase. Supplemental pay to educators who opt out of the educator compensation model of $1,261 minus the base wage increase.
So there's, excuse me, there's been a motion to approve the supplemental pay recommendations. Is there a second?
Second.
From Yoli. Any discussion or questions? Steve?
I was a little curious about this agenda item because I thought we dealt with it in the last meeting. So curious why it was brought up again.
In speaking with our attorney, what should have happened last time is it should have been two separate motions because it's two separate components. And so we're remedying that as quickly as we can so our teachers can get the money in their pockets.
Further questions?
Any other questions? All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And that is approved. Thank you. Our next regular board meeting is in 2 weeks, March 19th. The next one after that is April 2nd. Finance meets on March 19th. Policy meets on March 19th as well, because with those who were traveling today, there could not have been a quorum for that committee. One last thing, high school's spring play is this weekend. If you want tickets, you can get them online from Dee Dee Buzak. Otherwise, you can show up day of the show. So with that, I would accept a motion to adjourn.
So
Joe, second. Steve? Any discussion on whether or not we want to stay and let more snow fall?
it's already piled up.
All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, we're adjourned.